Hello, Internet. If you've seen Adventure Time, you've probably heard the quote from Jake the dog that says, sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. And I could not agree with that more. And that's why I personally love failing at things. So let me explain. So if you fail at something, it means that you were trying to do something that you wanted to do. You probably wouldn't have tried it if you didn't want to do it. You know what I'm saying? Or it's something that you felt like you were supposed to do. And in doing it, you realize that you don't like doing it or you're not good at it. And that's fine because you don't want to do it anyway. So failing at something means that you tried. And as long as you are alive and you're trying, you are succeeding. I truly believe this. The only time you can really fail at something is if you're dead, is if you're not alive. Because as long as you are alive and you are trying, you are succeeding. Are there different levels to failure? Obviously. Like if you're failing and it's ruining your life, like financially or whatever, like yeah, maybe try to avoid that in the future. But if it's just something like art related, especially, and you try to make an like you try to make a painting or a drawing and it just doesn't work out, maybe it just means that you got to just keep trying. Like failing the first time doesn't mean that you fail. And a lot of artists fall into this trap of perfectionism where, oh, I don't even want to make it if it's not going to be exactly what I want. It's like, well, how do you know how to make exactly what you want if you don't fail first? If you don't make something that's wrong, how do you know how to do it right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a reason that people have to go to school for baking. There's a reason that people have to go to school for being an electrician, for example. You can't just be good at everything. Like, that's not a thing that's possible. You have to fail to get good at anything. No one is born perfect at anything. That's not true. Sure, are there people that are more, predisposed to be talented at certain things? I believe so. But I don't think that that comes from some innate source. I think it comes from your experience as a kid and your perception of what you're pursuing, if that makes sense. So it's like if you're a kid and you're really good at piano and your parents encourage you to play piano, you're going to get so good at piano because you have encouragement and you have space to practice. Doesn't mean that you were just naturally gifted. You know what I'm saying? Like growing up, I played drums. My whole life, I was a drummer. And I never took a drum lesson once because I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew how to drum exactly as good as I needed to. And I wouldn't say that caused me to fail, but what it did do is it put it in my head that I don't need to be trying. I don't need to be working on improving. And honestly, this is kind of like an across the board thing for me with school my whole life is I just coasted. I always was a coaster because I was afraid to really try because I was afraid that I would fail. If you don't succeed at something, it's so easy to just be like, oh, well, I didn't try. You know what I'm saying? But if you try and you fail, if you really try too, if you give it your all and you fail, then that's really hard to come to terms with if you are living in the results of what you're doing. But if you're living in the process, then you are just going to fail. And failing is fun because failing is information. Failing is how you know which direction to go next. Because if you succeed at something and it's working, you're going to keep doing that thing. And maybe down the road, you'll have to change up your path and you'll have to try something different for it to continue to work. I know I'm being kind of vague, but just bear with me. But how are you going to know what to do if you don't try to do something? You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I make music, and whenever I try to sit down and make an album and I have like a concept in mind, it just never comes to fruition because as much as I like conceptual art and as much as I like when an artist sits down to make a body of work and they just put a lot of effort and time into one project and it has a whole overarching concept, I think that's awesome. But that's just not how my brain naturally functions. And I don't think that that's how I should approach making the best art. But I learned that from trying and failing. Now, again, defining failing is a whole other thing, because some people might perceive a failure as a failure and someone else might not perceive that as a failure. So like if I make this concept album, maybe I executed what I was trying to do, but that doesn't mean that I succeeded because it didn't come out how I wanted it to. I think expectations in art can be extremely limiting. I think it's good to have a realistic perspective on what you're doing, but to go into a project or any sort of art creation and expecting it to come out a certain way, in my opinion, is not a good idea, because art is human and humans are imperfect. So if you are a human making art, it's never going to be exactly what you want it to be. But that should not prevent you from doing it. And this is only for people that really want to pursue art. Like if you just are a casual artist, you do it as a hobby, this probably doesn't apply to you, because you're not going to get caught up in the results if you're not trying to achieve a certain thing. If you're just doing it for fun, that's probably the best way you can do it. You're just not maybe doing it as often as somebody who is trying to pursue it, maybe as a career, or just because they're so passionate about it that they can't not do it all the time. And that's something that I realized recently with my music is I don't necessarily feel like I have to be making music all the time anymore. There was a time in my life where I felt like if I wasn't making 2 or 3 beats a day minimum, that I was slacking and I was not pursuing art to the fullest degree that I could, which technically is true. But after years and years of doing that, I realized that I wasn't progressing because my actions were not aligned with my destination. Does that make sense? Like, the work that I was putting in was fine. There's nothing wrong with the amount of work I was doing. There's nothing wrong with the art that I was making. But my end goal did not match up with the art that I was making. So that was a really hard thing for me to confront. It took me years to confront that because I wasn't failing in creating the music itself, but I was failing in my pursuit of a career because they were not lined up. They were not one and the same. And in order to, I've never succeeded as an artist, so I don't know this for sure. And yeah, sure, anything can happen. You can randomly just blow up on the internet and that can be how your career starts, I guess. But I don't think that's going to be sustainable if you don't have a connected work ethic, or I don't even want to say work ethic. If you don't have if the way that you make art and your intention does not match with your end goal or your perceived destination, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like, if you're driving to Texas and your goal was to get to Ireland, you're never going to get to Ireland. So you have to figure out how to get to Ireland, or you have to figure out if you just want to be driving in Texas. You know what I'm saying? I know this is kind of abstract and weird, but I like to use analogies to describe my points. That's how I understand what I'm saying better even. So yeah, if you're having trouble working on something, really try to figure out what your goal is. Do you want to just make art, or do you want to just make stuff that makes you happy, or do you want to like pursue it as a career? Because if you want to pursue it as a career, you have to focus a lot on the business aspect of it. And that's something that like I'm just not good at when it comes to music. I've left that by the wayside. It's just not what makes me happy. But it took me a long time to realize that. And it took me a lot of failure or perceived failure for me to fully grasp that. But the whole time I was loving making music. That's the thing. If I'm making something and I don't like it, I stop making it because I'm like, this is a waste of my energy. I don't have any obligations to make music. I don't have any specific types of music I need to make or deadlines I need to hit. I don't have any of that. So if I don't want to do something music related, I just don't do it. But not everybody wants that, and not everybody has that ability because they're just not aware. So yeah, basically you should try to fail. You should put effort into failing, because if you're failing, it means that you're gaining insight and you're finding a direction that's more specific. And if you don't want a specific direction, then don't even bother listening to me. I don't know why you watched to the end of the video, which this is the end of the video. So hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next week.